Hong Kong. The Hong Kong police fired repeated rounds of tear gas and rubber bullets on Sunday to disperse protesters after some of them vandalized the Chinese government's liaison office in the city, in a direct challenge to Beijing's authority. The local news media reported that the police had also fired rubber bullets at protesters. Separately, footage from a local television station showed masked men dressed in white and wielding sticks assaulting anti-government protesters in a train station in northwestern Hong Kong. Sunday's unrest had begun as a peaceful march emphasizing the protesters' demand for an independent investigation into what they said was police brutality in earlier street clashes. But thousands of demonstrators later marched past where the police had said the official demonstration should end. The protesters then occupied major roads and heckled police officers stationed outside government buildings. Recover Hong Kong, it's the time for revolution, some of the protesters chanted. By nightfall, some protesters had defaced a crest of the Chinese government at the liaison office with eggs and black ink, and had sprayed the building's exterior with graffiti. Shortly after 8 p.m., about 100 riot police officers, some carrying guns with plastic rounds, approached the liaison office and dragged away metal barricades that protesters had placed in the road. Charge forward, they shouted, as hundreds of protesters fled east through the streets. But intermittent scuffles soon broke out nearby, with some protesters lobbing eggs and bags of liquid at police during a standoff outside the Central Police Station. After a group of protesters charged forward and threw projectiles, riot police officers rushed them, shooting several rounds of tear gas as the crowds retreated. By midnight, protesters had started to disperse. In a statement on Sunday night, the Hong Kong government condemned protesters who it said had blatantly challenged the national sovereignty by maliciously besieging and storming Beijing's liaison office. It promised to deal with these acts in a serious manner in accordance with the law. In a separate statement, the Hong Kong and Macau Affairs Office of China's State Council strongly condemned the actions of protesters who had blocked the liaison office and vandalized it, and warned of serious consequences. Such acts openly challenge the authority of the central government, the statement said, adding that the actions have a bad impact and were absolutely intolerable. The office also said it supported the CITIA's government in taking all necessary measures to punish criminals and to ensure the safety of the central government's agencies. The developments on Sunday were the latest chapter in the CITIA's largest ever demonstrations that have thrown it into the worst political crisis since China reclaimed sovereignty from Britain in 1997. They also signaled growing antagonism between the largely peaceful protest movement and the frontline officers patrolling it. I hope that the police can take reasonable actions tonight, Roy Kwong, a lawmaker who has been a driving force behind protests sweeping the city, told reporters at the front lines earlier on Sunday evening. Otherwise, I fear that the anger of the people will erupt. The Civil Human Rights Front, which has helped organize the recent protests, said it estimated 430,000 people had turned out for the officially sanctioned part of the afternoon march. A police spokeswoman said by phone that the estimated number of people who had marched along the permitted route during the peak period was 138,000. On Friday, the police said, officers raided an industrial building and seized about 2 pounds of powerful explosives, 10 gasoline bombs and nitric acid, as well as bullets, slingshots, knives and metal rods. The police described the site as a homemade laboratory of triacetone triperoxide, a highly unstable explosive also known as TATP. They said they were investigating whether the explosives were related to the Sunday protest but did not have adequate evidence to make conclusions. 3 men in their 20s were arrested in connection with the case. Hong Kong's mass demonstrations began in early June in response to unpopular legislation that would have allowed extraditions to mainland China, where the courts are controlled by the governing Communist Party. The bill has since been suspended but not fully withdrawn, one of the protesters' key demands. On Sunday afternoon, thousands of protesters dressed mostly in black t-shirts set off on a peaceful march from Victoria Park in the Causeway Bay area of Hong Kong's main island. Some carried signs saying, "A no extradition to China" and "A stop police brutality." The government must withdraw the bill and set up an independent inquiry committee to investigate the police, Tommy Tsang, an 81-year-old retiree, said at the start of the march. He said he was particularly angered by the police violence. If you don't hit people, why would they hit you back, he said. Supporters of the push for an independent inquiry include members of the CITIA's pro-democracy legislative minority, the Hong Kong Bar Association and the European Parliament. But advisors to the Territoria's embattled chief executive, Carrie Lam, said that her administration did not intend to make further concessions to the protesters. That stance suggests the government is confident it can weather further protests despite signs that the unrest could damage the local economy and the risk that more protests could result in injuries or deaths among demonstrators or police officers. Police officials say that they have largely acted with restraint and have used force only when attacked by protesters. They accused some protesters of rioting during recent demonstrations, including one in which a small group forcefully stormed the Hong Kong legislature and spray-painted political slogans. The police and a watchdog that monitors complaints against them have said they plan to investigate the tactics used against protesters at a June 12 demonstration that turned violent. Many people in Hong Kong, a city of about 7 million, say they believe that the police response that day, which included firing tear gas, rubber bullets and beanbag rounds, was excessive. But the protesters and their supporters argue that the watchdog is not independent and will not conduct a fair investigation. They also note that the Hong Kong government has commissioned past inquiries over civil unrest. At the Sunday afternoon march, the crowd spanned a diverse age range. Everyone is out here for their children, said Sam Tam, 57, who attended marches this month with his 8-year-old daughter and about 18 relatives. The older generation has to say sorry to the younger generation for not listening to their voices, he added. But as the sweltering July day dragged on, it was mainly those from the core demographic of the recent protests, young people in their 20s, who occupied major roads and swelled outside government offices. Brian Heung, a student at the University of Hong Kong, said he and other protesters had intentionally disobeyed the police out of a sense of desperation over the government's response to their demands. We have done everything peacefully, and they don't have a proper response, Mr. Heung, 18, said after putting up a post-it note on a barricade outside police headquarters calling officers shameless. So we had to push the limits. Before the march, protest organizers had requested a police permit to march west from Victoria Park to the Court of Final Appeal, in the center of Hong Kong's primary business district. The police denied that request and said the march would have to officially end in the CITIA's Wan Chai district, just east of Admiralty, a district that houses the CITIA's legislature and other government offices. But on Sunday afternoon, thousands of protesters at the front of the crowd defied those orders by streaming west into Admiralty, where the police had erected 6 5-foot plastic barriers outside parts of the government office complex. Some of the protesters there approached a metal fence outside the complex and began heckling police officers in riot gear who were stationed inside. Others gathered outside the Hong Kong police headquarters nearby, chanting, "A shame, The protest on Sunday came a week after a rally urging Mrs. Lam to resign and fully withdraw the extradition bill devolved into a frenzied brawl between a small group of protesters and officers in riot gear in a luxury shopping mall. The protesters have also turned their anger at mainland Chinese who visit Hong Kong to shop or to buy medicine, powdered baby formula and other goods for resale across the border. Last weekend, a demonstration in a Hong Kong border town against so-called parallel traders ended in clashes with the police. Demonstrations in support of the police have also been organized by pro-establishment groups, including one on Saturday that organizers said drew more than 300,000 people. The police put attendance at just over 100,000. An article published on Sunday in the PPA's Daily, the Chinese Communist Party's newspaper, said that days of violent behavior had harmed the Hong Kong's reputation as a trading hub and the direct interests of its people.